With a total area of 11,295 square kilometers, lakes and islands, and a flourishing biodiversity of woodlands and nature parks makes the Gambia one of the most ideal settings in the world. But every gift comes with a challenge, and for the Gambia, the preservation of a rich biodiversity, sustaining ecosystems towards stronger climate resilience has become one of the country's biggest priorities. The country has begun to see the real impacts of biodiversity loss and climate change amid destructive flash floods, windstorms, and unpredictable rainfall patterns, resetting socio-economic structures and domestic stability for a new normal, intricately linked to human behavior and the chain reaction effect, driving changing weather conditions. Long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns define the tumultuous era of climate change in the 21st century, with transformations that may be natural, but for centuries, human activities have been the main driver of climate change, primarily caused by the unchecked burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas, which produce heat-trapping gases, releasing carbon into the atmosphere. With limited industries and sound environmental policies anchored on practically achievable nationally determined contributions to reduce carbon, the Gambia was hailed by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change (IPCC) for being a climate leader, doing the most to attain the goals of the Paris Agreement towards the net zero emissions target nations firmly committed to deliver in 2015. Community action has been one of the key strategies used by the Gambia to expand policy implementation of the Paris Deal and raise awareness on what is a now concerted national effort to put up a strong front against climate change. In order to realize the long-term objectives of the Paris Agreement, countries were encouraged to formulate and communicate by 2020 focused long-term, low greenhouse gas development strategies that detail visionary plans towards a low-carbon, climate-resilient society alongside a framework for implementation.
I am happy to sit down here representing the country as a ministry to discuss issues of relevant to my ministry, which is the Paris Agreement. I know the Gambia has not been left behind. We are able to cover up when it comes to the NDC, our National Determinant Plan, and that has already been submitted to the rightful organization that we are working together with. For any institution or sector to efficiently deliver according to plans, there must be set targets and vision to lead you to that aspect.
The LTS encompasses a broad and extensive range of measures that incorporate the Gambia's sustainable development vision and steps the country must take to implement it through climate action.
The LTS process has been ongoing. It started last year in June 2021. That was the first phase, where we developed the terms of reference for the elaboration of the LTS, in terms of reference for the governance mechanisms, the steering committee, and the technical work group. So after that, we then proceeded to recruit a consultant, a firm of consultants, to lead the elaboration process.
The long-term climate strategy developed by the government serves as a guiding framework in the realization of a carbon-neutral society. The blueprint is meant to evolve and change in light of changing circumstances and developments in science and technology, as well as the global regime being driven through multilateral negotiation. The launch of the long-term climate-neutral strategy in January 2022 saw the government of the Gambia fulfill a crucial commitment to mobilize national resources in meeting challenges posed by climate change. Without a careful long-term strategy to tackle changing weather conditions, climate change may undermine development efforts with adverse consequences across the social spectrum affecting people, communities, and livelihoods, with particularly devastating consequences in spaces where we live and work. Increased awareness of climate vulnerabilities and the cost of inaction is inspiring necessary action within communities who are joining the quest to reduce carbon emissions and global warming in a period experts designate as a race against time to save the world for today and generations unborn.
Climate change is the biggest problem the world is facing in very near future, and it is the topic of conversation and utilization of all resources. Africa is facing the greatest challenge. You can see in Kenya, Somalia, there is drought. You can see in South Africa, there is too much rain. The global warming has created glaciers to melt down and raise the sea level. Banjul is only 2 feet above sea level. Just imagine that if the sea rose by 2 feet, Banjul will be gone. That's why it's important for us to address the challenges imposed by mankind. And those challenges have been mostly due to Western industrialization. But Africa is facing the consequences for that.
Today, climate change is intensified by cumulative accumulation of greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere, largely driven by human-induced behavior and an insatiable consumer culture. The global coronavirus pandemic puts long-term strategies in a whole new context, with governments refocusing energy on immediate economic stimulus, job creation, and stability of household incomes. At the same time, governments are also considering medium and long-term recovery needs alongside pathways to interlink economic recovery and long-term climate strategies.
Climate change is a global challenge. It can only be successfully overcome through a global, collaborative, and cooperative effort. The Gambia is prepared to play its role as a responsible member of the international community and make its own contribution. We are already doing so in the multinational negotiation taking place under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. The outcome that we are looking for must be effective, it must be fair and equitable. Every citizen of this planet must have an equal share of planetary atmosphere space.
Economic recovery plans and long-term strategies can have complementary roles focused on building sustainable long-term infrastructure and lasting jobs by building resilience to future shocks, such as repositioning economies to lead the clean industries of the future. Accordingly, work on long-term strategies should proceed in tandem with programs for long-term recovery. The outcome of COP26 sends a clear signal to all nations about the importance and need for long-term strategies that can achieve tremendous milestones to drive climate action if well designed and implemented. Long-term strategies will also help to create long-term planning processes that support the achievement of global temperature goals, reinforcing links between development, mitigation, and adaptation.
Climate change affects everybody. Of course, the contributors of climate change vary. The developed countries are the major contributors to the effects of climate change. And Gambia, according to research and facts, only contributes about 0.01% to climate change, or emits 0.01% of greenhouse gas in the world. But we are disproportionately affected by the effects of climate change. I mean, we've got floods, droughts, varying temperatures, which all affect the lives and livelihoods of all Gambians. It affects the agricultural farming system. So we can't ignore climate change. In as much as we are not a major contributor to climate change, but we still need to do our bit to fight climate change and also to mitigate the disasters that would affect us. So for us, mitigation is very, very important, and as well as adaptation.
Stakeholders in the country are aware of the impacts of climate change, whose effects are being felt in our communities in severe floods and windstorms. These negative environmental and climate change effects inform the government's formulation of the long-term strategy led by the Environment and Climate Change Ministry and partners to place the country on a workable climate framework. The strategy is a follow-up to the country's NDC, which will be submitted in the next COP27 in Egypt. Stakeholders gather at the Environment Ministry on August 24, 2022 to finalize the document after intensive work and research by the team.
We are providing long-term strategy for climate change activity in the country. And we had a series of meetings trying to validate the document. And the meeting basically to update the technical working group on the content of the document. The document has gone through so many review, and we've just been told that all the reviews has been incorporated in the report, and very soon it will be available for general review.
Government can do things. One is either to adopt or to mitigate. In the short term, adaptation is what is normally done. That is when a disaster strikes, then you have to take actions immediately. So the actions that you take immediately are the adaptations that you do. But if you want to do it in the long run, then you have to look for mitigation actions so that you try to avoid the occurrence or reoccurrence of such events.
The Gambia's Environment Minister, Rohi John Manjang, who urged development partners to support the government's climate action, is convinced with the technical capacity of stakeholders to finalize a strategy document fit for the purpose.
For now, we are handling the vision strategic development, which will lead us to what we can achieve or what we are supposed to achieve as a country under the Paris Agreement. Article 4.19 stress about us including in that agreement to achieve a zero emission. The Gambia has developed a vision called the Vision 50/50 climate change, and that vision needs to be guided by a well-designed and smart strategy that will set as a roadmap, as a checklist as to when, how, and what to look for. And this is what is now being prepared, set for preparation in consultation with other stakeholders. Almost more than 100 key players have been engaged directly or indirectly to give in their way, because climate change is cross-cutting. It requires everybody on board. All human beings on earth are key players. So that is what the ministry is also recognizing, to make sure that everybody's right and view is being captured in. So national dialogue has been organized, a stakeholder consultation has been organized, interviews, workshops, and that has helped us put forward a vision 2050. This vision 2050 needs to be guided by a strategic plan. And the ministry is happy enough to say that the strategic plan is well designed to make sure that at least we achieve our objective to be a climate resilient country, and of course to contribute to reducing the emission rate to 0% by 2050.
The Climate Change Secretariat of the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Natural Resources and partners subsequently validated the country's draft Long-Term Climate Neutral Development Strategy 2050, the LTS document. The start of the process for developing Gambia's LTS was launched by the Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Natural Resources on January 17, 2022. Officials believe the development of the LTS country-led framework is crucial in implementing the long-term goals of the Paris Agreement. To designate a center for capacity in the execution of the LTS, a Memorandum of Understanding (MOU) was signed between the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources, the American International University West Africa, Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, and the International Institute for Environment and Development, appointing Iowa as the legacy partner in the implementation of the LTS with a primary role to support capacity building.
As a university, what we are working on is creating a special bachelor's degree program for students to graduate with climate change as a main focus so that they can help not only Gambia but Africa and this world. And I hope that we stand the test of time creating professionals not only to serve Gambia but to serve Africa and the mankind. Because climate change needs to be addressed now, not later.
Climate change is greatly affecting agriculture and forestry systems due to the spike in temperatures, elevated CO2 concentration, erratic rainfall distribution, and increased vulnerability of organic carbon pools.
The real effects of climate change, I think, is something which, even the layman knows that climate change is happening. Because if we look at the recent years and even currently, just even last year, the windstorms that hit this country, its devastating effect, everybody realized it, and we know the negative effect that it has on the livelihood of many Gambians.
It is therefore crucial to identify pathways for the effective implementation of adaptation action to resolve soil depletion and impacts of biodiversity loss. The agriculture sector is a major source of carbon, contributing to greenhouse effects and climate change. However, changing climatic shifts are having far-reaching impacts on agricultural production, which is likely to challenge food security in the long run.
We did nothing to deserve it. We have not been contributing to climate change. But climate change actually has come now mainly through human activities. Human activities reform that there have been a lot of things that people are doing that contribute to greenhouse gas emission. There has been rampant felling of trees, and that is one way of going against mitigation.
So what we are also advocating for as a strategy, we cannot stop agriculture because people must be fed. You cannot develop a hungry with empty people which are living on empty stomach. That will not have. So agriculture, we must see how agriculture can be intensified, and at the same time we would not be creating more negative effect on our forest cover. So that's why we are also thinking about coming up with agroforestry strategies where you can be able to incorporate your farming activities, whereby you bring trees into your farmland and not take your farmland to the forest, because if you do that, you'll be causing what is called deforestation.
In the Gambia, environmental problems are directly related to energy production and consumption, covering a raft of factors including air pollution, water pollution, thermal pollution, and solid waste disposal, which all contribute to an unsustainable trend amid population density and uncontrolled urbanization. The emission of air pollutants from fossil fuel combustion is a major cause of urban air pollution in the Gambia, and more diesel cars in the country's roads mean even more carbon in a trajectory linked to the increase in unregulated emissions by heavy fuel vehicles.
The LTS is being developed to guide us in that process. So along the way, we'll have different mitigation. For instance, renewable energy. We have the hydro dam in Guinea. There's the Samangulu and the Caleta. So these dams, when they come online, that would reduce the fossil fuel generation that we are now using. Because currently our generators use heavy fuel oil. Even in ground pollution, we have seen oil spillages in Brikama, at Koto as well. So with the coming of the dams in Guinea under the OMVG project, hopefully that will solve our energy problems and also make our energy cleaner. The other option is to look at wind power. So wind power would also give us cleaner energy. With the better road infrastructure, we should see fewer traffic jams and vehicles becoming more efficient so that there will be less emissions from vehicles.
And some of the vehicles that we are introducing are these very, very old vehicles, which their emission level is comparable to nothing. So as a strategy, we can be able to limit that by coming up with a strategy where, old vehicles, maybe we come up with an age limit to vehicles so that at least we will allow vehicles that, are in a good condition.
The Gambia's waste management challenges come to life at a popular inner city dump site in Bakote, which is all that remains of an old mining strip. The craters and old stone excavations left behind now harbor mountains of waste generated from 500,000 people in Kanifing and the Greater Banjul area, covering the most densely populated regions of the Gambia. With an area equivalent to 25 football pitches, the Bakote dump site receives every kind of waste, with a rapid rural exodus and population growth in the metropolis putting a major strain on the waste dumping site, cornered by the urban nucleus. Huge plumes of smoke billow to the sky during the burning of waste pile, causing numerous health problems for the children's orphanage and residential estate nearby. Local government authorities and the Kanifing municipality have been closely working to find a solution to waste management challenges, and environmental groups have planted scores of trees around the dump site to mitigate carbon emissions. The growing ravages of climate change pose a global challenge, piling pressure on low carbon emitting nations like the Gambia to take giant and strategic steps to build resilience for increasingly vulnerable populations. For officials and stakeholders leading the race to beat climate change, success in the ever-demanding challenge means overcoming the hurdles, derailing a globally collaborative and cooperative effort to tackle the impact of changing weather conditions.
Climate change,
what I understand about climate change, one is the erosion, the floods, and the forest. Even the forest lately, there are only few trees.
Waste management.
The issue of dumping is as well causing more havoc. Even the gutters are filled with trash and unwanted waste. Therefore, waste management should be taken seriously to avoid climate change.
Don't settle on waterways. If you definitely settle on a waterway, if we have higher rainfall, you are likely going to be affected. Don't fell trees without replacing them. If you fell trees are windbreaks, they reduce the speed of wind. If you settle and you don't want to live with any tree, if a heavy wind comes and there is no wind to stop it, your house is going to go. So that means we should involve ourselves in tree planting.
The impact of climate change affects both crops and livestock, because the floods cause diseases and infections to the animals, causing death. Let us be aware of the existence of these livestock and leave space for them to graze on as we allocate land for crop farming. Truly, climate change is affecting us and our cattle a great deal.
On the 22nd of September 2022, the Gambia submitted its long-term climate-neutral development strategy 2050, the LTS, to the UNFCCC, that's the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. In COP26 last year in Glasgow, the parties who are yet to submit an LTS made a pledge that by the 23rd of September 2022, they would endeavor to submit their LTSs. As at September this year, only 52 parties had submitted their LTSs. The latest one was the Russian Federation. So I'm glad to say that Gambia, on the 22nd of September, following the validation of the LTS on the 9th of September, submitted its LTS to the UNFCCC 1 day before the deadline of 23rd September. And subsequently, the LTS for the Gambia was published on the UNFCCC website. So now it's a public global document. And as far as climate change is concerned for the Gambia, and in relation to Article 4, Paragraph 19 of the Paris Agreement, which the Gambia signed in April 2016, making it a legally binding treaty. As far as Gambia is concerned, we have fulfilled our obligations under that clause of the treaty.
This is an environment where everybody is a key player, not your size, but what we can do together would make a whole. And this is exactly what the Gambia is playing here as a key stakeholder. And I want to use this opportunity to thank everybody, and I call every one of us to play our part as stakeholders, both from the technicians to the citizens of this country. Climate change is real, and we know the impact is becoming unprecedented. And even if the big countries are still been battling of this unprecedented change that are unrealistic and unpredictable, Gambia can be left behind. So we have to play the action-oriented strategies to make sure that we achieve the zero emission, and we also put up for our resilience and adaptation plans to meet what the Paris Agreement and other agreements referring to climate change are all advocating for.
Already recognized as a global climate leader by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the Gambia is prepared to play a bigger role as a responsible member of the international community, making national and global contributions to combat climate change.